change in a society is usually persona non grata with those who have been the beneficiaries of the system. Welcome to On the Record, and today we're diving into President Trump's sweeping new immigration orders that, quite frankly, have left immigrant communities across America and the world reeling. These executive orders are reshaping who gets to call America home and how, with unprecedented measures that some say take us back to the dark chapters of our immigration history. In total, President Trump has issued 16 executive orders on immigration as part of his second term agenda. 10 of these orders were signed on Inauguration Day, 6 additional orders signed on subsequent days. And by the time we do this interview, there may be others that will roll out, but they represent a sweeping overhaul aimed at restructuring immigration across multiple dimensions, from asylum seekers at the border to birthright citizenship within the U.S. Joining me is someone who knows these challenges firsthand, Husein Yatabarry, appointed in 2023 as the executive director of the Muslim Community Network. From his own journey as a son of Gambian immigrants to his incredible work empowering communities in the Bronx and beyond, he's living testament to the resilience and leadership. Husein, welcome to the show.
Afternoon, Ebony. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, we saw this coming. We saw Project 2025. The rollout of these orders has been sweeping. These orders aim to fundamentally reshape U.S. immigration policies. Explain this broader scope, these changes, and how they're being framed by the administration.
Yeah, I mean, like your framing of it is exactly perfect. It's a sweeping overhaul of immigration law, but also like encroaching also on constitutionality, and especially with the 14th Amendment when we talk about birthright citizenship. So the framing of it by the current administration is that this will help rid the country of undocumented immigrants while trying to just put to the side all the unintended consequences and all the numerous amounts of millions of families that will be affected. The biggest piece kind of that's come to the forefront is the ending of birthright citizenship. He wants to redetermine, President Trump wants to redefine the interpretation of the 14th Amendment and prevent children born to undocumented families or those on temporary visas from obtaining automatic U.S. citizenship. So this will lead to an increase of stateless children, where they won't have statehood with their parents' home country, but they won't have American citizenship either. You have undocumented parents that may like stay away from seeking medical care or giving birth in hospitals, or like sending their children to school because like now my child may not have status. You have like significant legal challenges, thankfully, from AGs across, including New York State's own AG, Letitia James, in court in order to combat this like overreaching view on the 14th Amendment. But it's really, really scary how it's not just going to be about deportations, but just fundamentally changing the laws that's on the books in the United States of America. Yeah.
Now, we saw that with birthright citizenship, just specifically the temporary block on ending it. In legal development, we saw that it went before a judge. It was, I believe, 22 cities that came together, 5 states represented, 4 or 5 states represented. And the judge sent this back and was like, you cannot overturn the Constitution. This is illegal. And this was a Republican appointed judge under the Reagan administration. But I've seen a lot of headlines. It was like, well, it's on hold for now. How significant is this ruling? I mean, I'm going back and I'm saying, you know, this would have before roped in even people like Vice President Kamala Harris. Like, how crazy is this?
Well, like it's something to be concerned about, because while he's doing it on the executive order front, which has been blocked, there's also Republican members of Congress who have put across like a House resolution in order to also make this a law, like through legislation. So they're fighting it from the executive and that branch, and they're hoping to get it to Supreme Court where they have the numbers in their favor and to fundamentally change this law of the land. So they're working really, really hard in order to change the 14th Amendment, change birthright citizenship as we know it, to for their view of what makes America great again.
Mm. Let's talk about the impact on families and communities. These orders could impact hundreds of thousands of families. We saw today um, headlines and even the vice president's press office saying how they've already done these deportation flights that we have seen,
Yeah.
and they have more scheduled. I woke up this morning to that. But do you how do you see that, when you saw those headlines today and you saw the news and you saw the flights coming in and you have more scheduled, what does it kind of lead and direct you to do, even with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday we saw Boston. There were massive amounts of ICE detentions in Boston, and I'm in New York City, as close as Newark. A fish market was targeted by ICE officers, and thinking about like even the revocation of like sensitive locations policy and what that means to communities. That means schools, houses of worship, hospitals. Those are all fair game where there used to be restrictions on those sensitive places before. So like now the trust is going to be fundamentally broken between our immigrant groups that's in the United States of America from using and trying to access public spaces and public services. So I mean, for us, there's going to be a lot of advocacy just around like a strong push against this because especially within faith communities, houses of worship, I think all houses of worship should be protected places. Schools should be protected places, and hospitals. This was a Biden administration kind of like procedure, but Trump has rescinded that. Now we have to go to multiple different places around New York City, providing Know Your Rights workshops because people are
Mm.
in fear. We are starting to receive calls from our CBO partners where some of their immigrant students are not attending some of the after school programs anymore. Students are asking their teachers, should I come to school? Can I get picked up at school? And teachers don't know what to say to their students. They
Mm.
have absolutely no idea. Things are changing by the minute. So it's very scary for our immigrant communities. And this is something just as Americans, like we have to combat against because is very harmful and it's hateful.
I don't think people really also understand what it will do even to the workforce here. We're seeing
Oh,
stories roll out over and over when it comes to agriculture. People who voted for this administration who didn't really believe he was going to do what he said he was going to do. But then farmers coming out and saying, if this happens, you will see a serious shutdown in American agriculture. The cancellation of work permits is destabilizing the workers' families and American families.
yeah. I mean, in New York State, we have 470,000 undocumented workers in our state alone. Our governor, Kathy Hochul, has come out and said a massive deportation would fundamentally change will fundamentally change the workforce in our country. It will fundamentally change the tax revenue that we receive by New York State. So this is going to have massive harmful effects when we talk about producing in America. That's what the current administration, that's what they're big on, production in America, food grown in America. You won't have that without immigrant labor. That's impossible. And I don't think people are really, really thinking critically. People are just kind of thinking, looking at headlines and saying, "Oh, this must be good for me." It's not. Look at
Mm.
all the unintended consequences. Actually, look at the numbers. Look at the billions that immigrants are contributing to our Social Security, our families, Medicare and Medicaid. Like immigrants have been a backbone in this country, and it just seems very odd that many of these members in Congress, they have families that have roots in immigration from Ellis Island in the 1800s and 1900s, but now we're so anti-immigration when for me personally, it seems like when the melanin shifted to a darker skin complexion, now we're
Yes.
anti-immigration.
I was going to talk about that because, I haven't heard as much, but we have reported on in the past, especially when we saw Haitian immigrants, Nigerian immigrants being specifically targeted. It almost felt like the darker your complexion was, the worse you even caught it. So when we talk about that, are you hearing even an uptick in worries and complaints? This is coming off of a campaign trail where we were hearing they're eating their cats, they're eating their dogs, and bringing harm to communities who were legal citizens of the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, communities all across the city are feeling it, and I'll talk specifically about the Muslim community. There is a fear that there might be also a second Muslim ban because that was something that he
Yes.
talked about before during the campaign. And now we're talking about sensitive locations. ICE can run up in mosques looking for people. They can run up in children's schools. So there is so much fear for Black and brown Muslims across New York City and New York State because like there almost is no protections. Yes, NYPD and the mayor has come out and said the city will not work with ICE in any capacity whatsoever, but they won't also be a deterrent. So that means
Mm.
they'll have to allow ICE to go into these places and grab who they want to grab, whether that person has committed a crime or not. Maybe the person has been charged with the crime. I mean, people are being kind of like wrapped up in all of this ICE detention. There was a case yesterday, apparently in Boston, where someone was next to someone who they were looking for, but once they ran also his paperwork, he was undocumented, but he wasn't someone they were looking for. He was also grabbed and taken to an ICE detention facility. And those are some of the big fears that in our community there's going to be so much collateral damage. One from people who are being looked for, like on ICE documents, but then people who may just be around because immigrants often like come together in like very same communities.
Like most everybody else too.
Yes.
The Muslim community has faced, as you said, heightened scrutiny under Trump's policies in the past. Talk about how your organization is preparing to support and protect those who are feeling targeted from any of these new measures, and those who are feeling outraged or helpless. What steps can individuals take to push back against these policies?
Yeah. So for us, we're looking to continue dialogue with our elected officials to make sure their voices are being heard and not adding to some of the fray because we've kind of heard some mixed messaging from some of the electeds, even here in New York City, sadly, and making sure government is mindful of their statements and their alignment of who they're next to, because that also adds to the massive amounts of hysteria. So that's conversations that we're having. We're making, yeah,
What
I know
are
you
they
want to come on that
saying
point.
though? No, no, because
Yeah,
you make a good point. I know we're pushing against a lot of Republican leadership, but you have some Democrats too that
yeah,
need to kind of come out of
yes.
hiding and speak up. What are some of those things that you are hearing and that you're demanding?
Specifically when it comes time, and for during election time, immigrant communities are targeted by Democratic elected officials for their votes and for their support. But in this time of need, some people have either shied away from the attention of this immigration crisis or have come out right leaning
Mm.
in favor of deportation because it's it's a politically calculated move. And that's very dangerous in a city, in a state with so many immigrants that you depend on and that the city depends on. So making sure that government officials are really, really mindful of their alignment and their statements, making sure government officials actually allocate the dollars. That's something we're going to be pushing along with our coalitions. The dollars advocating for legal support for immigrants, dollars for integration services for immigrants and social services for immigrants. We have to make sure these populations are protected, but there also has to be funds and dollars allocated in like executive budgets at the state and city level. So we have to make sure that we continue to push for those things, but we are not just for the dollars, but also the rhetoric. The rhetoric really has to change in New York City and New York State, in making sure that the executives in both of those houses protect immigrants and come out in protection of immigrants.
We know that the administration is going to be going after sanctuary cities. We talked about that a little bit before. Another area that we saw that was extreme concern, that I want people to keep on their radar, is that we saw the separation of families, the separation of children.
Yeah.
And many of those children still have not been, I don't think people have understood, been reunited with their families. Uh, it is alarming, it is disgusting, and to me, it is sad when we look upon others with a lack of humanity.
Yeah. I think it's extremely scary because, like you said, some children have never been reconnected with their families, but then you also have like now the suspension of refugee admissions and asylum seekers at the border. So
Yes.
it's a further fragmentation of families. You have over the past few years, some families are in the United States, and now some families are on the other side of the southern border. The CBP One app is completely eliminated,
Yeah.
and completely shut down, and people don't know how they can get into the country to reunite with their families. So we are exacerbating a problem that's already been there and already been persisting, and it's just a melting pot of like major issues when it comes to immigration, and none of these executive orders actually help to solve it.
They don't help to solve it. Many are already getting caught up in litigation. Civil rights leaders are coming out left and right, in organizations like yourself, pushing back against this. How do you see this all ending? I see the smoke and mirrors of what people are seeing, but even with how the president wants to roll out some of these orders, the money that's going to be needed to fund a lot of these, whether it be those who are the border patrols, we saw him putting 1,500 more people on the ground. Do you see this unraveling quickly?
Uh, I can't predict, but that is my hope that it unravels quickly with all of the AGs and all of the governors and the mayors that are going to come out against these executive orders and policies. My big push is for people to also think ahead from now into 2026 and those midterm elections, because the Congress really needs to make a change, because like this whole Trump having the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch,
And the
that's
judicial.
terrible.
Yeah.
That's terrible for our communities. So with the judicial branches, we don't have much sway over there because he has the actual
Immunity.
immunity, and he has the ability to nominate whoever if someone rescinds their role.
Yeah.
But if the Congress becomes at least a little bit more blue, there'll be more of a balance when it comes to like legislation that's being passed. And that is my ultimate fear, is that he has carte blanche to pass whatever legislation that he wants right now.
Absolutely. Thank you for the work that you are doing in the community. Before we go, I want to ask, we'll give you the last word, but what are some things that you think we need to pay attention to that we're not quite maybe paying attention to? Because it is very easy sometimes to get caught up in the sound bites, to get caught up in some of these crazy moments and things, but there are repercussions and consequences as to what's happening. What are you watching that you want people to be aware of, Husein?
I think just understanding the anxiety within families and the anxiety within the
Mm.
students and the children. I used to be a former educator before I entered the nonprofit sector, and what I'm hearing from families on the ground, people are really afraid for their children, and they're thinking about pulling their children from school. Children as early as elementary and middle school, the potentiality of them being pulled from school because parents don't want them to be detained and potentially taken back to another foreign land, which they don't really have any ties to. All their ties are in America, in the United States of America. That's really, really concerning. And that's what people really need to think about. When you think about immigration policy, think about all those new Americans who will be affected. These are new Americans who are growing up in America and American culture and adding to the American fabric and want to give back and produce in this country and be just like every one of us that had birthright citizenship.
Absolutely.
Now that may be taken away for any future children born to immigrant parents, which is really frightening and scary.
The number over 250,000. I've been hearing quoted that could be affected by this, even though it has been halted by a judge. It's kind of a wait and see game. But in the mean and in between time, thank you for the work that you do, Husein Yatabarry, Executive Director of the Muslim Community Network. Where can people go to find out more information or to get involved and to stay abreast of what you're doing?
Yeah, our website is mcnny.org. And then also on X and Instagram, it's at MCNNY. We're going to be putting out some videos on how to protect yourself from ICE and detention and deportation. Some of those kind of like little webinars. We're also going to be doing few Know Your Rights workshops, probably like one a week within the New York City area in order to make sure immigrant communities are best supported and they also understand all the facts and like myths are also debunked because there's a lot of misinformation also being spread.
Husein, thank you so much for coming on the record to talk with me today. I look forward to hearing from you in the future and watching the work that you do. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ebony. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.